Welcome to Beyond Her Campus, celebrating 15 years. I'm Julianne Scriven, the Community Director at Her Campus, and we're excited to bring you this inspiring episode of our limited series podcast celebrating 15 years of Her Campus. In this series, we catch up with some of our most successful alumni, from news anchors and content creators to authors and mental health advocates. These women have incredible stories to share. Get ready for an insightful conversation filled with inspiration and advice. Let's jump in. Hi, Rosa. Thank you so much for joining us on Beyond Her Campus, celebrating 15 years today. I am so excited to chat all things from undergrad all the way to where you are now.
Thank you for having me, Julianne. I'm so excited to be here.
So I want to start at your undergrad. You were a chapter leader at WashU. Tell us a little bit about how you stumbled into Her Campus. Do you remember your first introduction to it and what inspired you to join?
So I wish I remembered my very first introduction, but I have a terrible memory is the thing about me. But I know that I went to WashU in St. Louis and we didn't have any journalism program to speak of. It's funny thinking back on it now because I was obsessed with magazines in high school. I plastered my bedroom wall with tear outs, and I don't know how I ended up at a college that didn't have a journalism program. But so because of that, I got on campus and I was looking for something to join where I could write and just sort of like have a little taste of magazine life. And that was Her Campus. And yeah, I think my first introduction was probably a Campus QD article that I was like, that looks fun. I'd like to be a part of that.
What a throwback to the Campus Cutie content. I remember scouring my campus for the exact person who we would cover that week. Mm-hmm. And I love that you mentioned that you had magazine cutouts throughout the wall. It's such a relatable experience to be in middle school. And I remember standing in grocery lines like, Mom, I have to have this. And she was like, you have a full stack at home. You don't need another. And I was like, you don't understand. This is slightly different than the one that I have.
It's newer, right? It's bigger, whatever. New covers are totally.
Yeah, it's shinier. And I would just scour through them to find anything that felt relatable. And I think for me with Her Campus too, getting the chance to write in a way that felt synergistic to a magazine that I was reading was so powerful.
Totally. I mean, I should say that there was a student newspaper on campus and that was fine. They were doing great work, but it was more staid and just wasn't as editorial and voicey and fun. And that was what Her Campus offered me at the time, which is definitely the kind of media that I've gravitated towards in my career too, right? Having a really strong point of view, a voice, a perspective. And that was what was so special about Her Campus at the time.
And getting the opportunity to define how you write as Rosa to an audience.
Totally.
Is so powerful.
Totally.
You were recently promoted to Executive Director of Content and Brand Strategy. Congratulations.
Thank you.
At Hearst. Tell us a little bit about what a day in the life looks like with your new role that so many of us would consider a dream role.
Thank you. It still feels very new and I started in April and to be honest, I'm definitely still figuring it out. It's a bit of a new job for the company. So I'll spare all the sort of like corporate details, but basically Hearst is now organized around 3 different groups. And so all of the magazine brands are sitting on one group and I sit on the fashion and luxury group. So that is titles ELLE, Harper's Bazaar, Esquire, Town and Country, Elle Decor and Veranda. And in my role, I report into the general manager and she is responsible for the P&L for the whole magazine group of fashion luxury. And so what I do is work really closely with the editorial teams to make sure that the stories that they're working on, that their big projects, that their editorial goals ladder up to the more business-focused KPIs. KPI, key performance indicator. I'm like speaking so much corporate jargon, but that's the thing. This job is definitely more corporate, right? I have more exposure to the business side of things. And that's why I wanted to take it. I wanted to get a little bit more experience outside of editorial. And so to explain what a day in the life looks like, I would say that it varies day by day, right? So some days I'm working with the ELLE social media editor and editorial team to come up with their fashion month plan. Another day I might be partnering with the editors on Town and Country. They just launched a membership a premium membership tier. And so thinking through what are we going to offer in this now kind of paid experience? What do readers think is worth paying for? How can we give them more of what they love from Town and Country? Other days, I'm sitting down with our finance director and thinking through, okay, we want to add this new perk to a membership program. Can we afford it? How can we afford it? So every day is a little bit different. It's a lot of audience development, and it's really exciting. It's thinking about how to future-proof these brands. Rather, shall I say, interesting moment in media history where the industry is changing. And so we're trying to think about, what do these brands look like in the future?
That has been something that's been weighing so heavily on my mind as well, with future-proofing from if you're an influencer and making sure that you own your audience apart from just your followers. So many folks are moving over to newsletter creation to have that capitalization on their audience and their followers. But I really love that you're forward thinking in that way. And it sounds like it's quite the challenge to be thinking almost like 3 steps ahead of what the media world is going to look like.
Totally. I mean, it's definitely not easy. There's so much unknown, right? We at Hearst, at least, we built a really robust search business. We kind of crushed the search game, right? And so when there are changes to the Google algorithm, it can feel like, okay, now what? Like, where are we going to invest in? How are we going to continue iterating on the search strategy that we've built? It forces your brain to be more elastic, right? Because the things that have worked in the past don't necessarily work now. And I mean, that's what makes it exciting, to me at least. Every day is a new challenge, and you can't just like rest on your laurels and be like, well, we'll do the same playbook that we did in years past, because that's just not going to cut it.
There is no job in media that allows you to just lean back on something that you were doing 2 or 3 years ago.
Totally.
You always have to be balancing new hats. I remember when I started in media, we were so emphasizing Snapchat, and now we have TikTok. We have video content in general that we didn't have.
Yes. Someone told me once, change is the only constant. And that is my North Star, because I just don't think you can not only be successful in the media industry, but you just won't like it if you're not comfortable with trying something new, throwing something off the train that is no longer serving you or working. Just like being down to experiment and try new things is just so core to being like a successful operator and just like a player in this space.
I think that's important for everyone to consider when they're working in media, when they're working in any space, that things are going to evolve, things are going to change, and keeping that as a positive rather than getting stuck in I liked the old way is going to be so beneficial as a young professional or somebody who's more established in their career.
Totally. I think, honestly, that's why I think I am where I am in my career, which is just always being game to hop on the bandwagon of the new thing and try it, and not feeling entrenched in my job description or kind of like I'm just going to be on autopilot and do the things that are expected of me. Like keeping an open mind and like your head up, looking around for what's coming down the pike, I think is just so crucial.
Speaking of where you're at in your career, keeping your head above and looking out for new opportunities, you have had a series of incredible positions at incredible publications like Cosmo, Marie Claire, People. What have you learned from working at so many exciting and often glamorized publications?
Such a good question. First of all, thank you for thank you for saying that. It's like, I still feel like I'm like the 17-year-old being like, how am I going to make it? You know, everyone who works in the media business is just so, am I allowed to curse? So damn smart. Like when I started at People magazine, I was right out of college. It was a foot in the door job. And I was just blown away by the sort of journalistic chops there. The reporters who were working there at the time that I was there had been there for decades and were so deeply connected in their field. I think that I just think that the people who work in this industry, as we've been saying, it really changes and evolves. And so they've been through a lot and have their war stories. But I just think that everyone at the end of the day is just so committed to storytelling. And that is what has always kept me really inspired and what I really appreciate about my colleagues. As for the glamorized the glamorization of these brands. There are certain days where it really lives up to its reputation, right? Where you get to go to a photo shoot and you're sort of seeing how the magic happens. Just this past week, I went to an event. ELLE Decor had partnered with a design firm to redesign a lounge at the Met Opera. And so it was the unveiling of this new space. And it was, very, very chic. And those days happen and they're still pinch me moments for me, but it's also just like a lot of hard work. And so I don't think that magazine life is often portrayed in movies, and it feels like you just like hop on your computer and type a few emails and then you go out to a long lunch with a friend, and it's definitely not that.
And there's champagne at lunch.
Right.
And,
yeah. Your martini. Yeah. Yeah. But I think, people know that it's not really that anymore. It's a lot of your phone losing battery because you have been editing a TikTok video all day or whatever. So yeah, it's some days it really lives up to its reputation, but then other days you're grinding. And I think that's, again, that kind of goes back to the every day is different thing that I like. And I think a lot of people have grown to enjoy that pace.
You mentioned the storytelling as such an inspiration for you. How do you balance doing some of the administrative work that just comes with progressing in your career and the passion of storytelling in your day-to-day and in your job?
It's a great question. I mean, I feel like that's just the reality of becoming more senior. Is there's more work that is sometimes less fun. And yeah, so when I started at People, I was the executive assistant to the general manager and the editor in chief, and it was a very administrative job. And I felt like I got a real look at the underbelly, the infrastructure of the whole organization and how it's a machine, and like the machine requires certain things to really operate. And so I have a lot of respect and reverence, not only for the current assistants that I work with, but also just like the fact that there is a machine that needs certain things to operate. I think part of what makes people successful is obviously being easy to work with. And someone who's easy to work with is willing to do some of the grunt work sometimes, right? And raise their hand and do the job that people don't want to do. And for instance, this was not grunt work, but in my last role at Cosmopolitan as the executive digital editor, I often had to do like some managing editor work, right? Help people create production timelines and chase after people to make sure that we were hitting certain deadlines and just do that kind of like making sure the trains are running on time. And I think that's true for any leadership position. And I just think that understanding that like no task is beneath you, no matter how senior you get, is so important. And also just means that people will like working with you, which I think everyone I know who is successful, part of the reason they're successful is because they are pleasant to work with. And I think that should never be discounted as like a valuable aspect of someone's career, is being easy to work with.
I think that potentially is some of the best career advice I've ever heard in a twofold step. Of that first step is no matter where you are in your career, no matter how senior you are, there is nothing that is beneath
Totally.
you. I think about that a lot for 18-year-old Julianne, where I was like, well, when I'm 29 or when I'm 25, I'm going to have this role that looks like XYZ. Mm-hmm. And I did, but it also did still come with pieces of that role where I was like, okay, I need to figure this out. I don't love doing this. For me, it's analytics, it's metrics, it's those number things. Mm-hmm. And I am just like, I want to just hang out with people. I want to just talk to people. I want to do this podcast. And I think that there's sometimes a misconception that your dream role means you are going to love every single bullet on your job description.
Yeah, God, no. I mean, that would be amazing. But I just feel like that wouldn't be a real job.
The second piece I think that is such valuable career advice is being pleasant and being nice to people. Mm-hmm. I think that when I was growing up, looking at these glamorized publications, watching movies like The Devil Wears Prada, and thinking to myself, they're all kind of means. To get farther in your career, is that how you have to be? And that never felt right to me or good to me. And I think that there has been such a transformative, positive shift in that if you're kind to people, kindness pays off. And it's so important to be happy in your working space, and everyone's going to feel more valuable, collaborative. It just makes for such a better day-to-day.
Absolutely. I mean, I have long thought about this because if someone were to describe my management style, I would want them to say collaborative, right? And like open door policy, because I am just one person. So if I'm making decisions in a vacuum without inputs from my team, I feel that the end result will be not as good. My TikTok algorithm is custom to me and I only see one thing and can't go to every single event or read every single story. And so having inputs from other people and then making sure that they feel comfortable sharing their honest opinion with me, I think just can only make the product and the work stronger at the end of the day. I think people like those mean leaders that you see represented in films and TV and whatnot, their teams must live in fear of them. And then they're not saying, hey, I actually think this is a bad idea for XYZ reason, or, oh, I think it'd be really cool if we did this thing. If you're not cultivating that open communication kind of space, I just think that that's where missteps can be made.
And I've seen it happen too when everyone at the table feels like they get to speak up and feels like they can say, I saw this on my TikTok feed, or I have this lived experience that could be valuable here. The product comes out tenfold better and
Absolutely.
so much more impactful and can reach so many different people when everybody comes together and gets to put their handprint on it a little bit.
Absolutely. I'm a firm believer in the good ideas can come from anywhere, right? It's not like the most senior people on the team are the only people who can contribute to a brainstorm. It's every level should have a seat at that table and their ideas are valid and worth talking about.
And one of the seats at the table that you got to work on at People was working directly with engagement on social media. Mm-hmm. This is an avenue that so many of us in media have either had to learn on the fly or now in school are learning what engagement looks like on social media. Tell us a little bit about what advice you have for people who are working on engagement, whether it is in the same capacity as you at a brand or independently as an influencer.
Okay. First, I just need to time machine us quickly. So what's crazy to think back on, because it wasn't even that long ago, is that People magazine did not have a social media team when I joined the brand. At the time, editors were responsible for just basically plopping their stories up on Facebook. There was like no real Instagram strategy to speak of. And so when they were forming their social media team, which was 2013, 2014, I raised my hand and I was like, I'd like to be a part of that. And at the time, I don't think there was a real understanding of the importance of social media for anything, as a traffic referral source, as a brand halo driver, anything like that. And so I just always think it's really funny to think back on, because I think my parents at the time were like, what are you doing social media? Like, that's not a viable career path. And now, I mean, I just think it's like the backbone of so much of the media that we consume across so many platforms. But yeah, I mean, I think that the thing about working in social is that you have to have the stamina to be always on. And I think that that's true even if you don't work in a breaking news environment. You have to be genuinely interested in looking at social media, understanding social trends. We all know how fast social trends move. They can be over in 24 hours. Like, you have to have a genuine curiosity to be consuming that kind of content and understanding. And I think innate to social media success is kind of a playfulness, just because of that is such a meaningful currency on the internet these days. And I think what's so tough about working in social is you can get burned out really fast, really easily. It's a really demanding space to work in. And so when I was a social editor and with the social editors I've worked with in the past, what I always try to remind them is take a break when you need to, but then reconnect to the spirit of the thing. And the spirit of the thing in my mind is pure entertainment and sort of like informing and entertaining and delighting your following. And I just think social is such this sounds kind of twee, but like a magical engine to reach people. I think it's a way that you can incept people in a way, not in a freaky way, but like something that I'm so proud of from the work that I did at Cosmo is all of the reproductive justice stories that we told during such a historic time in our country. And not everyone wants to read a story about abortion access at the end of a long work day. But I think if you can use social to package that story up in a way that's digestible, it's accessible, I think that is just like a really important to think about how social can be such a really impactful tool for storytelling in that way.
Storytelling and information sharing, especially for people who may have not heard it or seen it or had access before to hearing such vulnerability and stories that are so important to share. You also had a ton of firsts at Cosmo, working Sex After 60 digital issue, working with the first digital issue star, Chloe Bailey. Were there any big moments of these projects that stuck in your mind as so impactful to you as a storyteller, as a creator?
What was so cool about working at Cosmo for the 6 years that I was there, but this is true, I'm sure, for anyone who has worked in media over the past half decade, you're no longer working at a magazine, you're working at a brand. So the sort of offshoots of your brand are so different than they had been in the past. So when I was at Cosmo, yes, we had our first digital cover star, Chloe Bailey. We published our first digital issue, Sex After 60. Both of those projects were really important to me, and it was just very cool to be part of those sort of historic moments for the brand. But also we launched a fragrance when I was there. We published the first ever AI generated cover. We had stories that are being now developed into Apple TV shows. There was so much that you no longer felt like your job is to like wake up, write a story, edit a story, publish. That was it. It was just multimedia and non-media, right? Like real products, experiences, parties, events. So I think that just being able to kind of be part of the evolution of what it means to work at a magazine brand, print and digital are like just two pieces of what editors do these days to bring a brand to life. And I will just say, for me personally, I was a women, gender, and sexuality studies major. And so women's issues are very, very important to me personally. And so to get to work at a brand like Cosmo covering repro rights, and Cosmo has such a long legacy of covering that topic. And so to get to spearhead some of the modern coverage there, we published a big package after the Supreme Court overturned Roe. That was really supposed to be a galvanizing call to our readers to say, this was really shitty, but here are the ways that you can get involved, fight, get involved in your community. That was just really, I felt very connected to that work.
And like I said, it's such important work. And Her Campus has our bodies issue that's going up. And it is stories like these and women's stories that are often untold unless they are in a situation where it's like the country is shifting. And I think that's why it's so important to maintain those legacies and tell these stories year after year and month after month. So that way people connect with them and hear them and we keep on this topic.
Absolutely.
I also know that you mentioned that now media is almost larger than life to some extent. There's digital and print, but to your point, it's also transitioning over into potential TV series and just skyrocketing into these other formats. What do you think the future of media is, and what do you think the future of the industry looks like?
If only I knew, Julianne. I know that is the $1 million question that we ask ourselves every day. I think that the reality is people are consuming a lot of video content, right? And so video content, vertical video content will continue to be super important as a storytelling medium. I think that it'll be a lot of the things that we've talked about. So trying out more things in the event space, bringing your brand to life in new and exciting ways that don't have anything to do with reading, whether it is a TV show, whether it is some kind of experience. We're thinking a lot about membership, and not membership just as an effort to get people to pay for content, but membership as a way to really connect with our core loyal readers and bring the brand to life for them in a way that would be really meaningful. I think that, at the risk of saying the media buzzword this year, we're definitely thinking more about engagement. So I am a firm believer that the media industry is not going anywhere. These brands some of the brands at Hearst and elsewhere have been around for 100 years. That's longevity, that's staying power. I think that they can still be really influential tools and still are arbiters of the culture. And I think that we will just continue to find new ways to sort of like express that influence and continue to be tastemakers across new mediums.
It almost sounds to me like the future of media could rest more so in an emphasis on community than anything else.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, especially because I think it's the same way that you kind of align yourself with brands these days to show the world your values or your taste or your personality. I think that is what we'll still see people doing. You just mentioned the word community, and I think that is the key here. Networking by yourself is a lonely endeavor, right? You're all on your own trying to forge connections. I had no connections to the magazine industry. I got a lucky internship break. So then and so I was able to leverage that and get more internships. But so, it's a really tough industry to break into when you don't know anyone. And I think that what Her Campus enables is this sense of community where that can be your opening salvo when you connect with someone on LinkedIn and say, hey, I saw that you were a Her Campus alum. And I think just knowing that there are a group of people out there who had this experience in undergrad, I think Her Campus is really one of the tenets of Her Campus is making media a nice place. And I think that is like that commonality of all of the alums that I've met over the years is just great to know that there are people out there. And actually, the woman I hired at Cosmo to be the social media editor, Maddie Hyatt, is a Her Campus alum. And that was like something that we certainly spoke about during her interview. So yeah, I think it's just nice knowing that there are people out there who have this shared experience with you.
When you're combining being pleasant to work with and community, the world opens up every door for you.
Totally. Completely agree.
Before we go, Rosa, we have some rapid fire questions that we are asking all of our guests on the pod. And the first one is, what would you tell your 21-year-old self?
Okay. I feel like I have to talk fast because it's a rapid fire question.
Good time. We want to hear everything that you would tell 21-year-old Rosa.
Oh God. 21-year-old Rosa needed to get a new haircut. Okay, so my former colleague, Julie Wilson, who is the beauty editor at large at Cosmo, we were having a conversation about career growth and whatnot recently. And she said something that really stuck with me, which was, you want to play chess, not checkers with your career, meaning that you want to think about how your current job is not setting you up for the next job, but maybe the job after that, and taking a longer view of your career and the decisions that you make, the jobs you take, the people you connect with. And so I would tell 21-year-old Rosa, who is not yet wearing SPF every day, that she should be playing chess, not checkers with her career, and thinking about where you want to end up. And I guess it's a little bit like the version of like, where do you want to be in 5 years? But who can answer that question? I certainly cannot. I just think about what are the pillars of the career that I want to have? What are the skills that I want to have acquired? What are the projects that I want to have worked on? That sort of thing. And so I would tell her the chess, not checkers.
I love that analogy. It's definitely transferable as well, even no matter what stage in your career you're at as well. What is one thing you are looking forward to?
Okay, weird answer, I think, but I want the election to happen.
I'm actually right there with you. I am counting down 47 days from the date that we're recording, and I'm counting down.
Yes. I am about to do some door knocking for Kamala in Philly next month, and I'm excited to do that. It is obviously a very, very, very important election. I am very worried about the outcome, and I'm just ready for it to happen. I'm very invested in getting out the vote, and so I'm going to do some work around that, and I'm just excited, cautiously, tentatively, nervously excited for the election to happen.
I completely agree. Her campus is making it easier than ever to register to vote, check your voter registration, and we will have everything living on hercampus.com. So I really do encourage listeners to head over there and make sure that you're registering, getting involved with topics that matter to you. I completely agree, Rosa. My sister and I have done some phone banking for the first time, and it is so rewarding to know that I am participating in this election a little bit more than passively. And for those of us who have a level of anxiety with the election, I will tell you from firsthand experience, it really does help feel like you're doing more?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways to get involved, from phone banking, from letter writing, driving people to the polls. And I think that is certainly how I'm trying to channel my anxiety is by doing something and feeling like I won't wake up the day after the election and be like, oh my God, why did I just sit on my couch and with my eyes glued to the TV, whatever. So I'm fully there with you.
Wonderful. And good luck. Door knocking is so important. I saw Jane Fonda was door knocking in Michigan the other week.
Amazing.
And our last rapid fire question for you is, can you tell listeners where they can find you and where they can keep up with your work?
Absolutely. Instagram. I'm Rosa_Heyman on Instagram, and that's probably where you can find me most often. Of course, LinkedIn as well. And yeah, I would say those are the two.
Awesome. Rosa, thank you so much for joining. I had so much fun chatting with you, and I can't wait to keep up with the future of media with you.
Thank you, Julianne. It was great to be here. And thank you to the whole Her Campus team for having me. I loved it.
That wraps up another episode of Beyond Her Campus, celebrating 15 years. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. If you loved this episode, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to leave a review. We'll be back in 2 weeks with more incredible stories from our amazing alums. Until then, HCXO.